Jennifer cannot answer your question. The Nikki Haley campaign cannot name a state that they can win in. And people did say that she could win New Hampshire. Governor Sununu, her biggest cheerleader up there, was running around the state saying Nikki Haley's going to win in a landslide. And then all of a sudden he started to walk that back. And then he said, oh, no one's expecting her to win. It doesn't matter if you take second place, Jennifer. No one gives out silver medals in politics. She lost in Iowa. She lost in New Hampshire. She's going to lose in South Carolina. There is no pathway to victory, and it's a disservice to the American public that you guys are pretending that she can win.
Okay. Jennifer Nesser, we'll have you back. We appreciate it. We'll be watching this.
Call 911. Call 911. Caroline Levitt just murdered Jennifer. Jeez. But it's true. There is definitely frustration in the voice of the Trump campaign, because this is just, we are in uncharted waters. We normally see candidates enter the denial and delusion phase. But I think after last night, it is now becoming clear to everybody that what I have been trying to explain to people through all of our data graphics and the polling, through all of the interviews we've conducted, through all of the transcripts we shared, through all of the things that we have conveyed with the money and the filings and everything. This is not a normal primary. This is crazy. And every time they set the bar and move the goalposts, he meets those expectations. He beats those expectations despite overwhelming odds. They just keep shifting and shifting and shifting. So you can't blame them. However, I will say the pressure will build on Nikki Haley, and we're going to talk about that. Welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit, post-game for New Hampshire's presidential primary. If you like the video, don't forget to like them and share them far and wide. Hit that notification bell after you subscribe. That'll let you know when we are going to go live. But of course, the best place to follow us is on Locals, peoplespundit.locals.com, where we were live rooting on the historical records because we're nerds until almost 3 o'clock in the morning. They just stopped eventually counting. But as we can see in the map here, which I will show and make larger in a second, he has surpassed that. So we now have the first in the nation caucus under our belt behind us. We now have the first in the nation primary under our belt and behind us. And all the media wants to talk about is the fabricated spin from the fabricated campaign, the AstroTurf campaigns. I care about what people are going to be talking about 10 years from now. Maybe more. Bernie's record held for 12 years, right? No, I'm sorry. 8 years, excuse me. This one is going to be even harder to break because of the share of the overall population. Maybe not. We'll see. But if history is any guide, this one will be enduring for a bit. All right, so we all went over the Iowa records. It is not normal for a presidential candidate to break one record in each state in the first 2 contests in a nomination contest. Donald Trump broke 3 in Iowa, and he broke 4 in New Hampshire. This is insane, despite the fact that they motivated. We'll go into the data a lot deeper. But, and I'm going to play some clips here that I think you guys really need to see. But the bottom line is what you're seeing with Nikki Haley is different than honest. And I was just telling Benny Johnson this, if you guys were watching. It's different than honest conversions. Like, for instance, Barack Obama converted a lot of people. Even Ronald Reagan, because he had smoked George Herbert Walker Bush in the 1980 New Hampshire primary. He got 79,000 plus votes. It was a lot of votes for back then. He converted people. Those independents you hear about, right? It is not normal for that many of the other parties leaning independents, because the truth is, and if you watch Inside the Numbers, you know, there are very few true independents. Most independents have partisan leans. And what we see from Nikki Haley is not an attempt to convert former Biden voters into now Nikki voters. The plan, these people they have no intention of voting for Nikki Haley or anybody in a general election. They will vote for Joe Biden. Hanover County or Hanover Township. All you need to do is look at Hanover Township and then compare a township like Hanover to townships where there aren't that many behavioral Democrats to target, and you can see it clear as day. Hanover in 2020 gave Donald Trump a little over 700 votes. Nikki Haley got over 2,000. In fact, she got about 40% of Joe Biden's general election vote in Hanover Township from 2020. This kind of thing takes tens and tens of millions of dollars to pull off. It is remarkable, and it's something we have never seen before. You know, old conservative talk radio host Rush Limbaugh, the late Rush Limbaugh, he used to talk about Operation Chaos all the time, and Democrats would try, but it never really came to fruition. But it's unique what's happening here this year because nobody ever spent this much money, especially in small states with tiny populations and cheap media markets. I mean, her campaign alone was in the $30+ million range. That does not include Americans for Prosperity sending delegates, apparently, all over to these rural areas to get Democrats to vote 10 here, 15 here. God knows how much money they spent on 6 votes in Dixville Notch. If reporters would do their job, you guys would hear about this stuff, but they don't. All they care about is hating Donald Trump, and that's it. I mean, it's sad for you guys because you don't get the whole story. And then again, we won't find out until some of these filings come through, but the amount of money is disturbing. And by the way, we're going to talk about why what she is doing is going to cost the GOP a fortune. And I'm not just talking about how much it will cost to continue the primary. I'm not talking about how much money they're wasting that could go to the general election. I'm not talking about or outreach for that matter, building voter registration operations, vote gathering, ballot chasing, whatever you want to call it. I'm not just talking about that. I'm talking about the hidden costs of doing business in this business that she is running up by playing this game. But before we do, if anybody has any doubt that this is not the normal, oh, those are the rules, guess what? Those people vote. That should be a warning sign. You're an idiot. This is a primary electorate. More people vote than they do in other primaries. And New Hampshire's independents don't exactly represent the rest of the nation's independents, let alone South Carolina's independents. Which, by the way, Trump is winning even in New Hampshire where he is down in the polls. In the Marist poll, he was still winning independents, which is suspect to me because they are liberal. They're much more liberal than they are conservative. Those days are gone. But again, let's look at Shaggy over here in Hanover County.
Christian, who did you vote for and why?
Yeah, so thank you. I voted for Nikki Haley, and it was certainly a strategic vote. I think the DNC is fairly resolute in their nomination for Joe Biden. And while I wouldn't vote for her in a general election, particularly on our differences with climate change solution, a women's right to bodily autonomy, or incarceration rates, I think a vote for Nikki Haley helps diminish Trump's influence in the RNC and their nomination, but is also a vote towards democracy.
And Christian is emblematic of so many conversations that I've had here throughout the day. Rachel?
Alex, Christian, thank you very much. Appreciate it. It's good to have that perspective.
Strategic vote. 3 pumps. Exactly. That young man. Yeah, call him that. Comb your hair, bro. Take pride in how you look. That young man, and I'm not dissing voters. I'm just saying, like, there's something wrong with men in this country, and that, like, they just don't take pride in themselves anymore. I got to tell you, I deal with it with my own son and his friends. It's like, comb your hair before you leave the house. Anyway, that young man has absolutely no intention of voting for Nikki Haley if she is the Republican nominee. He has no intention of ever voting for a Republican. He just told you that he disagrees with her opinion with her position on abortion. However, if you look at the exit polls and actually the AP vote cast, the exit polls are a whole other story. Media better. I don't think they care. This is now the second contest where the Edison Research exit polls were not good. You don't believe me? Frank Luntz was pouring over them. He thought Nikki Haley was going to lose by 4 to 8 points. That's what the exit poll suggested. She could get within 4 points. Not the AP vote cast. They did not suggest that. They suggested that with the exception of those independents and moderates, which was even closer than expected, or the moderates were closer, where the independents were closer than expected. The moderates were not. They showed you Trump outside of that won everything else. 10% of the electorate was Democrat. Never happened before. Has never, ever, ever happened before in the New Hampshire primary. And where does she go from here? We've talked about this a million times. Where does she go from here? Let's get into the records. Okay. Donald Trump now is sitting at 172,202 votes, and he leads Nikki Haley by 11.1%. There is about 4%, we estimate, of the vote out, and it is in Trumpy townships and areas. She has some vote out as well, but there's no chance that she pulls him down below 10%. So the single-digit victory that she claims now to have wanted. I don't need to run. Caroline Leavitt did a beautiful job. I don't need to run the clips of Kristen Nunu and Nikki Haley. They said they were going to win New Hampshire. About a week ago, when all of the polls started to get away from, and by the way, why were they that confident? Because when the polls were 10 points, they believed that pollsters weren't factoring in the $30 million they spent getting Democrats and behavioral Democrats to vote in the primary. And they thought they were going to be able to pull off an upset. They 100% believed it. If you heard Kristen Nunu's comments to reporters, I'm not just talking about what made it on TV. I'm talking about what you saw clips from reporters on TV. If you went to events and you heard events, if you know people who are going to these events like we do and bring us back feedback, Kristen Nunu was unequivocally saying Nikki Haley was going to win New Hampshire. Because they believe they had 10 points in the bag with these voting Democrats. That's a lot, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a lot. And before seeing these results today, you may think, and somebody like me even, would say that's really bullish and that's very difficult to pull off. Nobody's ever done anything like that before. But hey, there it is. They did. But when those polls started to go sideways, including their own internal polling, and Trump's lead did get to about 20 in a normal electorate, that's when they shifted the goalposts. Reality can take a couple of days to sink in for candidates who have gone to donors, taken tens of millions of dollars from them. And by the way, Nikki Haley's got some tough phone calls to make today. That's something the media will never tell you. This is how the game works. There will be Republican donors who are really pissed off this morning. Democrats, they don't care. They're going to blow that money. They really don't care. The chaos is working for them. They have a horrible candidate. He was totally humiliated by Dean Phillips, a representative from Minnesota. Nobody knows. We went over on the coverage last night how historically poor for an incumbent president, Joe Biden, even as a write-in, how historically poor his performance was. They don't care. They need something drastic here. And you can clearly see it. And Nikki is helping give it to them. And there are going to be Republican donors who call today, and they're going to be pissed. What did you do with my $500,000? What did your PAC do with this? What did your campaign do with that? They're going to be furious. And eventually, she's just going to be left with pedo Reid Hoffman and Democratic donors, because that's where the grassroots is coming from. I'm telling you, when we get those filings, you're going to see. Even her so-called grassroots will be Democrats. And Reid Hoffman and company and David Plouffe, who's on loan from Obama's campaign, have no qualms whatsoever about her going to her home state and being absolutely humiliated. They don't care if less than 2 weeks from now, or whatever it is really 2 weeks from now, they don't care if none of these candidates beats Nikki Haley or comes close in the Nevada Republican primary. They don't care if she gets smoked in a caucus that is allocating delegates that she's not even competing in. And if you go, again, it is a death sentence in politics to lose your own state in a primary, any primary, a Democratic primary, Republican primary. Marco Rubio lost his own state. He will never be president. He will never run for president. And I'm not saying this to knock Marco Rubio, but do you know who is talking to donors about running for president in 2028? Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz won his home state. Even though he wound up losing the nomination, he still lived to fight another day. If, and it's a big if because you have James Clyburn, who has been pining for South Carolina to be the first in the nation contest for Democrats, to be moved up on the calendar. That's why New Hampshire didn't award any delegates last night for Democrats. James Clyburn is going to want Democrats to participate in the South Carolina primary. He's going to want to beef up Joe Biden's vote share so he's not humiliated there as payback for Joe Biden uprooting their entire system and destroying tradition. But let's say none of that matters. And all of the money that they spent again is quadrupled, okay? And she goes down to South Carolina, spends a fortune trying to recreate what she did here. Donald Trump would still win by 15.8% if the electorate is 10% Democrat. If the electorate, for instance, is 35% moderate, only 55% conservative, and about 1 in 10 are liberal. If they can make South Carolina that electorate, she will lose by 15.8%. But the chances of that are extremely unlikely. Why? Evangelicals were only 21% of the vote in the New Hampshire Republican primary. Trump carried them 70-27. And actually, they were only 19%. They were over, apparently, it depends on which one you're looking at, roughly 80% in Iowa. In Iowa in 2016, they were 64%. In South Carolina, they were 72%. If Iowa, and maybe there was, because of the weather, a glitch, and we're going to have to be careful with our projections because, as locals knows in our preview we work with Decision Desk, Republicans blew our forecast for turnout out of the water. I think they got a little bit more than 180 plus thousand, don't you? They smoked it. And they did by getting those Democrats out. And again, I'm not trying to insult anybody, but you can see those little yellow townships. We told you, and we told people in the preview that Nikki Haley was most definitely going to carry Plainsfield. She was most definitely going to carry Lebanon. She was most definitely going to carry Hanover. 3 townships Marco Rubio carried in 2016 when Trump carried everything else. We told you that Concord would be Donald Trump's worst of the 3 big townships. It is also the little bit smaller than the other 2, which is, of course, Manchester, where he won by 15.7, and Nashua, where he took back. There was a pattern all night long. And if you're watching the coverage, you knew it. And it supported what I have been talking about with how this is not the normal Democratic crossover voting. This is totally different. The pattern was this, ladies and gentlemen. As the votes came in, it was almost like early vote shares get dumped first, and then election day comes in, and the early vote margin has to be big enough, or that election day margin is going to overtake the person who was leading in the early vote. There was an early vote here like that. It's very small. What was going on is that Democrats who don't work, and I'm sorry, it's just true, behaviorally so, they have Zoom jobs, they're able to vote during the day, where you have the working class, the non-college white voter, that is a Trump voter, and I'm not, again, this is not to insult anyone. They will vote later in the day, and many of them vote when they get off work. How does that impact how the results are totaled? They get fed through the Scantron, and they're ordered, and they're counted in that order. Trump carried whites with no college degree by 30 points, 64-34. She carried whites with a college degree by less, 61-37. All right, those Democrats who they got to come out voted earlier in the day. So we would see her margin break bigger in the initial report. In Nashua, when that vote was first reported, she won it. She won it pretty handily. Same thing in Concord. But as those votes were tallied from later day voters, she began to lose her edge. Nashua flipped, he flipped them, and he flipped a bunch of other little ones. When you look around, though, at some of the more rural areas, you have townships where if you get a handful of people to come out, ladies and gentlemen, like here's a great example, Randolph. If you can get 15 Democrats to come out and vote in Randolph, you're going to flip that township because it's so small. And there were some where you would expect it. Massachusetts burbs, I'm a little bit surprised at how she did not do as well as I thought she did in some of these other areas. But if you get to a township, for instance, like Salem, home to the Sununu dynasty, there aren't that many Democrats to motivate, not compared to Republicans. And Donald Trump smoked her there, 68-32, in what is in a humiliating shellacking and rejection of the Sununu family dynasty. If there were townships with less Democrats, she did poorly. She did very well in blue suburbs and blue areas. She didn't do well in urban areas. He carried urban voters. So for, again, everybody who is constantly obsessing over the suburban vote, she barely carried it. She carried it by 1 point. She lost it. Trump carried it in Iowa. But urban votes, Trump clobbered her 57-41. I, for one, want to see, obviously, they can do better in the suburbs. And obviously, I think we're going to see that swing, actually, because this is not a representative Republican electorate. It's just not. And then, by the way, urban areas, I'm sorry, Trump won 53-44. It was the rural areas he clobbered her in, but barely. I mean, they were tied. The AP Vocast says it's 50-49 Haley in the burbs. Why? Because he won the competitive burbs, the truly purple burbs. She won Democrat areas. Upper crust, affluent liberals. How do we know? Salem is affluent. Salem is educated. There are a lot of people in Salem. I mean, a lot of wealthy people is what I meant to say. A lot of wealthy, educated people in Salem, and they are Republicans. I've tried to explain this before. It is not correct to say that, MAGA has a burb issue. There are certain burbs they do just fine in. Town about 35 minutes from me, Morehead City. I've repeated it over and over again. It's very much like a Salem, only it's, in this case, it's a much more water culture. Everyone's got a yacht. Everyone's got a 35, 45-foot fishing boat. Everyone goes marlin fishing in the spring, right, Laura? Everyone goes out for wahoo, or everyone parks their boat up by the wharf and goes to the restaurant. Everyone goes shopping in the antique stores where everything costs a fortune. Everybody goes to the fine dining restaurants. And apparently everybody votes for Donald Trump because it's a Trump plus 32 county. It's not that simple. And when you know that and you look at that map, you can see it clear as day that Nikki Haley 100% had the backing of these Democrats that absolutely nobody, none of these people are going to vote for her or any Republican come the fall. It's just not going to happen. Let me take a real quick break, and we're going to bring on our guest, who I'm super excited to have on. I got a couple things I want to talk to him about, a bunch of things, honestly, frankly. But yeah, let's take a real quick break. We'll come back. We'll do that. All right. Listen, if you want to get healthier in 2024, you made yourself a little resolution, and I tell you, don't make resolutions, set goals, not resolutions. Then Field of Greens is a great place to start. You've seen all these Big Con, the Super Beats, the this and that. None of them have given you the guarantee that it will absolutely improve your health. And when you go to your next doctors and check up and do blood work, whatever it may be, your doctor's going to tell you they notice a difference. Field of Greens, we love the feedback as always. I'll tell you what, across the board, it's been nothing but great. It is impossible to eat the fruit and vegetables that doctors and studies and everything tell us we need to consume on a daily basis. Laura and I have tried it. It's not possible. This is both of our habit space. This is what we call it, Laura. This is our fruit and green habit. And we can get all of that in one simple, drink from Field of Greens. And it's with us, everyone's different. With us, notice the difference immediately. Give it 2 weeks. You'll notice it in your skin, your hair. Every ingredient was chosen for a specific reason. Some to help support your heart, your lungs. For me, metabolism is a big thing. Healthy weight loss, of course, is a big thing. I'm 42 years old, right? So if you want to get healthier in 2024, start with Field of Greens. I got you 15% off and free rush shipping. Go to, there it is. Thank you, Laura. fieldofgreens.com. Use the promo code TPP at checkout for the People's Pundit. Again, that's fieldofgreens.com. Use the promo code TPP at checkout and get yours today. And send us your feedback. Like I said, we always love feedback. Nothing Laura and I pitch on this show is something we don't personally use. And I pitch on, but Laura and I both love Field of Greens. I want to bring him on. Candidate for the Attorney General, Missouri. He's been on before. We love him. You know him. Will Scharf. Also, member of the Trump legal team and brilliant addition, apparently, because it was very successful. How you doing, Will? Thanks for joining Inside the Numbers.
Doing great. Great to be with you after such a great night in New Hampshire last night.
Yeah, I mean, what do you make of this? I mean, Will, this was still a very significant win. The records were being broken. I was nerding out. I was loving it. And then she goes to the microphone for the first 15, maybe 30 seconds. It sounds like, reality has dawned on her. And then she just does this Bill Clinton pivot to I'm the comeback kid. I mean, it's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, look, 2 points. I mean, you're the data guy, but if turnout among Democrats and independents had been what it would have been in a normal election cycle, Trump would have won by like 25 points. One.
Absolutely.
Two, Haley's campaign every day looks more and more like Marco Rubio's from 2016. They're sort of trying to claim victory, even though they're getting absolutely stomped. There's no data picture. There's no evidence that this primary is going any way other than being an absolute landslide for Donald J. Trump, who's going to be our next nominee, and I think is going to be our next president as well. So it was a fun night.
He's the first Republican presidential candidate since, I believe, 1976 to win Iowa and New Hampshire. That doesn't happen in the modern era. He could have done it in 2016 if Ted Cruz didn't pull his little trick, but it is what it is, and it's in the history books. But, him and Scott Walker, since I've been a pollster, only he and Scott Walker have ever polled winning margins in both Iowa and New Hampshire. What he did is absolutely historic. The most votes ever received. He not only beat Bernie, Will, he smoked Bernie's record. Over 12% of the entire state population of New Hampshire voted for Donald Trump last night in a presidential primary. Bernie's record was 11.04 or 03 when he set his own, for total votes. That is astonishing. I mean, data nerds like me, we just don't see that stuff. That is enormous participation. And you're right. We did the math, by the way. If we're being kind of conservative, Trump would have got a little over 60%. She would have got 38. And I'm trying to be generous. And other would have gotten 2. So he would have beat her by at least 22 points if it was a normal historical electorate for a Republican primary. This is crazy. What's driving me a little bit nuts, or Bernie was 11.32. Thank you, Robbie. He corrected me. What's driving me a little bit nuts is that every time these exit pollsters ask these questions, they bring up these cases. Okay. And will you vote for him if he's convicted and he's a felon? First of all, I disagree with asking that question. Number one, it's a loaded question, you know, and presidential elections are A/B tests. They're going to have to make a choice between 2 men or a third party and throwing away their vote. But that's the way, for the most part, most voters are going to say, do I vote for the guy who has these things hanging over his head, but my life was better? Or do I vote for the guy where my life is not good and he's the one prosecuting this guy? I mean, that's really the choice. If you're going to ask that question, Will, you have to ask, What about if Joe Biden is impeached for taking bribes from China, or they find out that it used his son as a bag boy, right? So that would be a fair way, if you're going to ask loaded questions, to even do it. But the truth is, from just put your hat on, and I know you can't, you're probably limited to what you can, say about some of this stuff, but is there going to be a case, in that district anyway, before the election? Like, is this even a question to ask?
So 2 points that I'd make. One, you look at the polling, and I think it's something like 80% of Americans believe that these prosecutions are politically motivated. So nobody is fooling the American public. Everybody knows that if President Trump weren't running to be president, he never would have been indicted in the first place.
Yes.
So that's point number one. Point number two, when you look at the last month and a half in the entire litigation portfolio that President Trump is facing, it's been win after win after win. Colorado, they kicked him off the ballot. That's going to the Supreme Court in a couple weeks. We think we're going to win 9-0, maybe 7-2. It's an absolute victory. President Trump's going to be on the ballot. Their Hail Mary plan to keep him off the ballot's going to fail. You go back a year and a half, and we heard this idea that President Trump was going to be stuck in a courtroom facing trial after trial after trial. Well, now the D.C. prosecution, which was set for trial in March, is stayed pending final resolution of presidential immunity issues, which could take many, many months. The Georgia prosecution, which the libs said was so dangerous and so terrible. Well, now Fani Willis probably faces more in the way of criminal jeopardy than President Trump or any of his co-defendants, based on this corrupt bargain she struck with her secret boyfriend, who she appointed special prosecutor and then paid $1 million in taxpayer funds. So that case just looks better and better by the day. You look at New York, the whole case is relying on Michael Cohen's testimony. This is a serial liar, a known perjurer. That case just isn't looking like it looked, a year and a half ago. Just up and down the line, it's been win after win after win for President Trump. And I think the idea that these cases are going to pose any kind of barrier to him campaigning effectively for office, which I believe was the point of them being brought in the first place, that's just not going to happen. President Trump's going to be able to campaign. I think if he's able to campaign, he's going to win for all the reasons that you just said.
Yeah, this decision by the judge with that E. Jean Carroll case, it's just absolutely outrageous with the New Hampshire primary. It's so blatant. It's so obvious. And I don't know. I mean, anyone who's a man and then anyone who's a decent woman should be outraged over that case, which isn't even, it's obviously not a criminal case, but you should be outraged over it because women should be, not anyone, should be punished severely for lying about rape. This is a heinous act, and it's becoming like an epidemic in our culture. Christine Blasey Ford, Michael Avenatti trotted out a bunch, not just one got more attention, but a bunch of liars. He's now, where's he, by the way, Will? Right?
He's in federal prison.
He's in
I worked on the Kavanaugh confirmation, so you're hitting some issues near and dear to my heart here. But yeah, look, we've seen this over and over again. E. Jean Carroll's she's a known fabulist. President Trump has consistently denied all of her allegations. Those cases, I think, are a sideshow. Fortunately, though, they're not interfering with his ability to campaign, and they're not going to interfere with his ability to campaign going forward.
Yeah, that Harvard-Harris poll that came out yesterday. The only reason why, because for people who don't know, they asked people if Trump is convicted in the Florida case, if Trump is convicted in the D.C. case. He won still by, he was up, I think, 6 without it, but he was still up about 4 points, even if he was convicted. The one that hurt him the most was the Georgia case, but that was a pollster trick. You put the word RICO in the damn sentence. RICO's for John Gotti. RICO is for the 5 families, and this invokes like this fear, it's a very negative word. So it's most unserious case probably. Have you, real quick, because I want to talk about the immigration ruling with you, but we've talked a lot about ethics and you just brought it up. Have you ever seen, and she's had a reputation, it was a lot of whispers. Have you ever seen anything like what is now, it's beyond being alleged, it's true. I mean, have you ever seen anything like this with another prosecutor like Fani Willis? Like, have you seen this before, or is this? I mean, this is
No,
nuts.
it's absolutely insane. You know, she hired this Nathan Wade guy who was her secret boyfriend to be the special prosecutor in one of the most important, biggest cases in American history. He was wildly unqualified to do this. I don't think he's ever had a single felony criminal trial before. She paid him over $1 million of taxpayer funds. Meanwhile, he was shepherding her around the world on vacations to Napa Valley and luxury cruises and all kinds of other stuff. I mean, I think she faces real liability, potentially a federal honest services fraud prosecution. There's serious stuff there. And I think it's just really important to note that the Georgia case corrupts all the other cases as well. Yeah. That Nathan Wade, this special prosecutor that she hired, he was in the White House counsel's office. We know this from billing records. He was in the White House counsel's office on November 18th, 2022, which is the exact same day that Jack Smith was appointed special counsel by Merrick Garland. I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but this certainly looks like a conspiracy. And it's too cute by half. I think in the coming weeks, we're going to continue hearing this drumbeat of revelations about how corrupt all of these prosecutions are. And at the end of the day, I think it's going to strengthen President Trump, not hurt him.
I could cut that ad, Will. I'm telling you, I could see it in my head now. What you just laid out, I mean, the headlines, and even then, you're going to run it in the Rust Belt, end it with that statement right there. There's no coincidences. The American people don't believe in coincidences like that. They are not stupid, so you could run that ad. That could be an ad. I'm telling you, too cute by half, paid for by Make America Great Again. I'm telling you, I could see it. I can hear it right now. I want to talk to you though about the Supreme Court case that Amy Coney Barrett and Chief Justice Roberts, at least at this point, sided with the Biden administration against the state of Texas over this fence or this wire, right? I've heard, doomsday commentary from conservatives, and I've also heard that they don't like the ruling, but that the district judge who crushed the government in some of his commentary also had, come to that legal conclusion, so it wasn't as bad as it seems. And that it's also temporary, so I've just heard from everybody who seems to be, from the left to the right. I've heard all these different interpretations of it. And I really wanted to get you on to help break this down for people, what you think and help break it down.
Yeah, look, I'm obviously ticked off. The idea that Texas can't put up some razor wire to stop this invasion we're seeing at the border, I think that's nuts. I think the decision they made was legally wrong. It's worth noting, though, that we've seen consistent victories at the Supreme Court level when you have cases that are fully briefed on the merits, when you have cases that are moving through the normal process, that receive full briefing and full argument. Where we've seen some of these conservative justices waver is on cases that are brought up on emergency appeals, appeals of stays, things that are on the so-called shadow docket. We have much less information about the reasoning that went into this decision than we would with a normal case. So I'm not ready to throw the baby out with the bathwater yet. I think this Supreme Court has delivered incredible victories for the conservative movement over the last couple of years, overturning race-based affirmative action, overturning Roe versus Wade, standing up for religious liberty, standing up for the Second Amendment. And I think we're just getting started. I think we're going to continue seeing great victories out of this Supreme Court. It's just unfortunate that we had this case proceeding on a somewhat irregular posture where apparently Justice Barrett decided to go the other way.
Yeah, if I could get into like a philosophical conversation about the role of government and the social contract, like you said, this is not on the merit really, and obviously it'll be hammered out later. And there was some commentary. I'm thinking about Tucker. I mean, it's popping. Tucker is really standing out because he started to talk about ultimately the social contract or compact, whatever you want to call it. And if these people are not allowed to defend their life, their land, right? Then it's like a breach of the social contract. And I don't know that I would characterize it as hyperbolic. I understand what he's saying, but he's basically like, if the government's not going to protect you, where are the men of Texas to protect you? What do you think about rhetoric like that? Look, don't get me wrong. I love Tucker, but it's like, shit, at least we let this hammer out before, we start talking about stuff like that.
I I think at a very basic level, if we're talking first principles, the state exists to preserve freedom. We give certain powers to the government with the understanding that the government is going to use those powers to ultimately protect our rights. And I think Tucker's right in a sense that if the government's not protecting our rights, that's a serious breach of that basic social contract that underlies representative government. That's what I think so outrageous about this situation at the border. Under President Trump, the border, I wouldn't say it was controlled, but it was certainly a heck of a lot more controlled than it is now. We didn't have this issue with millions and millions and millions of people coming across the border. Just yesterday, it was revealed that this guy that they caught coming across the border is an Azerbaijani terrorist. I mean, it's a really scary, dangerous situation. And the complete inability of the Biden administration to get its hands around it, to get this situation under control, it really is it's a governmental failure of epic proportions. I think that's why it's so important that we win in 2024, that we take back the White House, that we take back the U.S. Senate, and we start advancing, I wouldn't even say conservative policies, but just policies that protect the rights of the people again. I mean, that's really what's at stake here. We just have a total failure of government to live up to its most basic responsibilities to the American people.
80% of the electorate last night in New Hampshire, and again, this is like as moderate and as like close to never Trump attitudinally as you're going to get. 80% said they want Trump's border wall built. 7 in 10 said that immigration is makes the country worse, not illegal, just period. Now, this is where people are, and I can't really blame them for it. You know, you heard Roger Stone, who is the president's old friend. They go way back. He had a tragedy in his family recently. Our friend, who's a local elected, wonderful woman, her stepson thought and he's not even an opiate user. I mean, kids are 18, 19, and they experiment with things. He thought he was buying like a 5 milligram Percocet, but it wasn't. It was a cartel fabricated fake that was filled with fentanyl, and he died. I mean, the task force said, without a doubt, we see this all the time. They're made below, they're made south of the border, and they're smuggled through the border. And this is just outrageous that it's so prevalent. It's outrageous that nobody on the Democratic side of the aisle, except for Dean Phillips, apparently, thinks that this is what you just explained. Because I really, it gets dangerous when you start to talk about failures of the basic social contract. So we give up, we give up certain liberties in order to get a protection back. And if they're not doing that, or allowing us, or allowing the people to course correct through the normal means in a self-governing society, elections, the court, if they're not getting remedy, then we're in a dangerous place. You worry about that?
Yeah, all the time. And, the fentanyl issue is near and dear to my heart. As you know, I was a federal violent crime prosecutor in St. Louis. I prosecuted fentanyl dealers, prosecuted gangs that were involved in the distribution of fentanyl. This is really scary stuff. We're on track for probably 120, 130,000 overdose deaths in America this year. It's an insane number. I mean, we're talking over 2 times the death toll of Vietnam or Korea in a single year from preventable overdose deaths. And it's all coming from Mexico. It's all being trucked over the border. It's one of the reasons why border security is so important. But I'll make another point. We've seen in general in America a rise of these so-called deaths of despair. Overdose deaths, suicides, particularly among young men. I think that speaks to just generally a sort of social malaise that's set in the last few years. People feel dislocated. People feel like they don't belong to enriching communities anymore. I think we have a deeper cultural rot in America that we need to address if this country is going to have a successful future. And I think the Democrats' willful blindness on a lot of these issues, they're willing to play essentially just partisan politics with issues like the border, with issues like fentanyl trafficking and human trafficking. It really speaks to the moral bankruptcy of the Democrat Party today.
Again, when you only have one person, Dean Phillips, and there was saying, I went to a Trump rally, I spoke to these people, these were cool people. These are not unreasonable demands of a society of people to make. Then it blew up on, and I don't really watch Fox anymore, but I saw the clip. This argument blew up on Fox News where Charles Payne just hammered Jessica Tarlov, the Democratic strategist. You cannot demonize people who are asking for a reasonable response from their government. You cannot continue to just simply demonize them because you don't want to respond. You know, this is the last question I'll ask. It's 12:50. You think some element of the Democratic Party does this on purpose? I mean, thoughts on the right. You have people who just, some people just say that, it's incompetence. Others say it's replacement theory, and then, you have some who say that they just hate this country so much. If you were to design a plan to destroy this country, you would be doing what the Democratic Party is doing. I mean, you were just talking about deaths of despair, particularly among young men. That's a great way to hollow out the future, Will. That's a great way to end it. And there just are people who see this as, you can't be this dumb. It has to be intentional, right? I mean, where do you come up on it? Where do you stand? What do you tend to think?
Yeah, look, leftism is a virus. The only thing it's able to produce is more leftism. Leftism historically hollows out every institution in which it takes hold. We're seeing that today in America with these DEI bureaucracies running wild in universities and businesses in almost every major aspect of American life. I think the modern left in America fundamentally doesn't respect the American people. Think back to Hillary Clinton's comments about us all being deplorables. They don't believe that the American people know what's best for themselves. And that's just a very, very scary worldview. Look, I'll be honest. I went to school with a lot of these people. I went to Princeton undergrad, Harvard Law School. There's this sort of cosmopolitan globalist leftism that believes that if we just put the elites in charge and push democracy to the side, the whole world will be better. When the history of exactly those sorts of policies is the opposite. That's what leads to terrible things like the eugenics movement in America in the early 20th century, like globalist doctrines, Nazism, communism. I mean, these are all terrible, bankrupt ideologies that all stem from the same basic view that democracy is overrated, that the people don't know what's best for themselves, and that authoritarianism of any stripe is preferable. That's what we're all fighting against today in America. I believe in the Constitution. I believe in the rule of law. I believe in the American experiment. I think it's the most deeply noble experiment in human history. And I'm hopeful that our country will have a bright future. But to get there, to get to that bright future, we're all going to need to fight like hell. And that's why I'm in my race. That's why I'm working for President Trump. I think it's incumbent on all of us to stand up now and be counted.
Yeah, it's I got nothing to add to that. I mean, I couldn't have put it better. I mean, I will say this. I feel like we're one bad 5-4 Supreme Court decision away from utter disaster. I mean, we cannot rely on the high. If we're in a position, because they've, like you said, infected these institutions. And if we're in a position where we're constantly relying on one single body to fix what is like systemically corrupt and broken, and I don't even know what else, ideologically possessed, a friend of mine used to say, if that's where we're at, then there's a lot of work to do, Will, and the hour is late. So, and look, you running for Attorney General of Missouri. Where can people learn more about you, follow you? You also write for the Federalist here and there, which is great. Every time Will publishes something on the Federalist, it's staple reading for me. But tell people where to follow you, Will.
You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Truth Social at Will Scharf. Our website is votescharf.com. Really appreciate you having me on. Great to be with you as always.
You're welcome anytime. Thanks for coming on, especially in such short notice. All the best, and we'll talk to you soon.
Talk soon. Thanks a lot, Rich.
Take care. Will Scharf, everybody, running for Attorney General in the state of Missouri. Just incredible, incredible. His experience is just incredible. So he knows how the impact of so many of these issues. Maybe it's my age, but I remember when Democrats at least used to care about the impact, or pretend. Maybe they were pretending. I remember Harry Reid standing up in the House of Representatives. That's how old I am. I remember Harry Reid standing up on the floor of the House of Representatives and just eviscerating the impact that illegal immigration was having on his state, his communities, his voters. Yeah, he's a brilliant guy, man. Will is a very smart guy. By the way, the arguments that he came on and made on this show, were then put, when he was hired by President Trump, were then put into practice, and they have had a great deal of success since they brought Will on. So yeah, he's a smart guy. It was a smart move. He'd make a great attorney general. Look, he knows the issues, but he also has compassion. You really need to have that kind of a balance, but he knows when it's time to stick it to somebody. You cannot tolerate certain things, but also that, the society can't be an overly punitive or draconian. And he just, to me, it's just really is the right balance. And he knows his core is solid, and he knows where he stands. He knows what, what is necessary, the balance that is necessary for society to remain stable. Those are the people, honestly, that should be in law enforcement roles. He just said it himself. He went to school with a lot of these people, and unfortunately, and we discussed this the other day on another show. Unfortunately, or it was our book club, I think. Prosecutors, many in Will's position, it has not become, they always say, it's the job of the prosecutor to seek justice. That is not what a lot of these people are doing. It has become, I'm going to get my man. I'm going to raise my conviction rates into levels that do not at all demonstrate a fair judicial system, but an unfair one, and one that unfairly, unduly burdens and punishes people who are unable to defend themselves, or people who are targets of the state, the administrative state. It's a very easy system to game. And when you look at the numbers like I have, and eventually when the elections are over, we're going to talk a lot more about this because it's becoming a very important issue to me. But, we've come a long way from John Adams arguing that, guilty people should go free over the potential for innocent men to go to jail. This is just absolutely, wrong one. This absolutely is not the case anymore. So we need wise people, honest people with character in these positions, and they're not, so they do not abuse them, right? And unfortunately, there's just too much of that. All right, it's 12:57. You're watching Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. If you like the videos, don't forget to like them and share them far and wide. Subscribe wherever you are. And then, you know what? If you subscribed on YouTube, it would be absolutely appreciated if you would mosey on over to Rumble and do the same. Sign up on Locals. Become a member at first if you want, because the best place, of course, to follow us is on Locals, peoplespundit.locals.com. You'll get a lot. This is the time to sign up. Even when he puts even when Donald Trump becomes the presumptive nominee and we're going through the process, we are still going to give all of the information before the primaries, like we did last night and like we did before Iowa. It's going to just keep rolling on and continuing. So now would be the time to do it. peoplespundit.locals.com. Let's take a real quick break. And when we come back, we will talk more about New Hampshire. All right, let me tell you about our friends at Jam and Bean. Patriots, like I always say, don't ever give a politician credit for COVID. There were very few, if not none. And certainly they're not the people who raise their hand and say that they were the champions against Fauciism. All right, the true champions were the everyday people who fought COVID tooth and nail and lived to survive through it, even though they could have went under, even though they could have been punished for trying to live their life. And that's what, they're not just great at what they do. They also happen to be great people and great patriots. Jamandbean.com. Use the promo code TPP40 when you sign up for a new subscription, whether it's their delicious coffee, teas, gourmet popcorn. They are expanding, and they have, look at that. Nothing says I love you like bacon. They have so much new stuff. We're going to get another care package to share with you guys real soon, as a matter of fact, and we'll give you our take on it. Always send us feedback. Of course, we want to know your favorite flavors. And again, what that'll do when you sign up for a new subscription to Jam and Bean using the promo code right on the screen, TPP40, that will knock 40% off the initial subscription cost right off the rip. And then every month when it does renew, you're still going to get 10% off. You just can't get a better deal than that. By the way, folks, to speak to the coffee people right now, I like freshly roasted beans. I like to grind them. I like to brew coffee the way coffee is supposed to be brewed. But sometimes I also am in a rush and I have a Keurig and I use a K-cup. You have, sometimes you just don't have the time. Whether you're like me and you need to do both, or you have one preference or the other, Jam and Bean's got it for you. The medium-bodied roast that Jam and Bean has, Laura and I were just talking about it before the show, is the only true medium-bodied roast you can get in a K-Cup. I've tried them all. I've opened up them all. I've looked at it. These people put R&D into it. If you want to go get yourself a Starbucks medium roast at the grocery store and knock yourself out, pop that puppy open and you're going to see what looks to be a disgusting foam filter with just a little less dark roast. There's actually quite a bit of a science behind it, and they nailed it. So their medium roast, their medium body roast is full flavored. It is good. Sometimes I like a medium later in the day. So I really, there's no other one I will drink. Jamandbean.com, promo code TPP40. Jamandbean.com, promo code TPP40. All right, let's talk more about the pressure here. All right, that I said we were going to build. This came out yesterday, and then we're going to roll into why I'm going to tell you why what Nikki Haley is doing is, and I think Rona gets this now. I think what Nikki Haley is doing is very damaging to the Republican prospects for the general election for myriad reasons. But you can just watch her face, and we'll talk about it after.
Looking at the math and the path going forward, and I don't see it for Nikki Haley. I think she's run a great campaign, but I do think there is a message that's coming out from the voters, which is very clear. We need to unite around our eventual nominee, which is going to be Donald Trump, and we need to make sure we beat Joe Biden. It is 10 months away till the November election, and we can't wait any longer to put our foot on the gas, to beat the worst president, to beat a president that's kept our borders open, allowed fentanyl to pour through, allowed inflation to go rampant. He is hurting the American people, and we need to do everything we can to unite so that we can defeat him.
Speaking of philosophical arguments, real quick before I continue, I said this last night on the coverage, but if you believe what Rona just said about Joe Biden, and you were paying attention to the conversation that Will and I were having about the real impact that his policies are having on American families and communities that are really devastating. Do you not know anyone who overdosed from fentanyl? I know a lot of them. People who have kids, loved ones. I know a lot of them myself, way too many. If you really believe that, then how on earth could you justify doing what Nikki Haley is doing? If you truly believe that Joe Biden is, and don't give me this, that you think you're the better candidate, you think you're the more electable candidate. Listen, you have to bury your head in the sand at this point to really believe that. Morning Consult, praise be to God, glory to God in the highest. Morning Consult has been apparently quietly behind the scenes doing what we showed you for a year, not just asking people, who are you going to vote for in the primary? Who are you going to vote for in the general? That crap is boring. The devil's in the details. The juice is inside the numbers. If Donald Trump is not the Republican nominee, you will not see turnout like you saw last night equivalent to the general election. You will see those Haley voters again vote for Joe Biden and not her, and she will be missing way more than I even anticipated. After seeing what I saw last night, after looking at the exit polls that I saw last night, this woman would have the worst base problem. She'd have a worse base problem than Mitt Romney. She would. And with modest estimates, Mitt Romney was missing about 3.5 million white voters from the Midwest and the North Midwest, northern areas to be competitive. And certainly in Florida, we can go over different demographics as to why he lost Florida. She would make Mitt Romney's turnout problem look like, a minor issue, a blip, statistical noise. Even the Marist poll showed that. But Morning Consult did a great job. You should go read it if you haven't read it. But it's why Donald Trump is the Republican Party's strongest nominee. Nikki Haley's voters are not Republican voters, and Donald Trump's voters are only Trump voters. It's that simple. Rona's starting to sink. That's starting to sink in now to Rona McDaniel. And I know this from email exchanges. I'm not going to get into everything that really is in confidence here. But I will say this. I don't think she knows what to do about it. But I do know that Rona understands they have a significant problem. What is that problem? There is a massive disparity in the get out the vote operation between the Democrats and the Republicans. Let me let everybody in on a little secret. The polls weren't really that wrong in 2012. They weren't. Republicans underperformed because they failed to realize that elections are run differently in the new age. Elections are won differently in the new age. This is not about persuading the swing voter in the suburb anymore. That's not good enough. Republicans did better with them. They won over 40% of the postgraduate degree vote. They won 30% of the non-college white vote, working whites. They didn't get enough of them out. Democrats got voters out everywhere they needed to get them out, even though they lost the popular vote by a margin that insinuated they should have about at least a 15 to 20 seat majority. They didn't, because Democrats know how elections are really won now in this country, and that is through tech, infrastructure, get out the vote, voter registration, voter motivation. How do you know? You can see it, by the way. Now that Democrats are helping Nikki Haley, David Plouffe is helping Nikki Haley, and they're lending all their tech to help Nikki Haley. You can see it works. Donald Trump is a turnout machine. There's no doubt about it. You want to leave that up to chance? Ronan knows there is a massive disparity. And all of these people who are attacking Charlie Kirk and Tyler Bauer from Turning Point USA and Scott Pressler, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. You just don't know. This is not your strong suit. You created your account in 2020 or 2022, and you have no idea. You are clueless. You have no idea what it takes to win an election. Tyler's not getting paid anymore. What they did do is spend massive amounts of money trying to identify what the problem is. And now that they see it, they know. And once that curtain comes up and the full picture is unveiled to you, you start to truly appreciate the scope of the Democratic advantage in the modern era. They don't just have better vendors. They don't just have better data. They just don't have better tech. They have everything from common application, push notifications supporting them on common applications on everybody's Samsung, on everyone's Apple. They have way more donor money that is just willing to write blank checks for work that is not sexy, that doesn't get them access. They have a unique infrastructure that's totally remote. They have true believers. They don't post ads to Craigslist to go get people to knock on doors to convince voters. How'd that work for Ron DeSantis, who once again deployed the Adam Laxalt model? How did that work? It was a total grift, knocking on doors in South Carolina 6 months ago. The guy smoking weed on the front porch and getting caught on the doorbell ringer camera. They don't do this. And Rona's starting to see it. And she's like, well, this keeps up, it's going to be my head. They have Bank Your Vote, but Bank Your Vote is not good enough. Bank Your Vote is simply aimed at getting already registered and active Republican voters who vote already. They have significant vote history to get their vote banked early. That is not good enough. It's also incredibly stupid. Everyone who studied it, us, Morning Consult. By the way, we've been studying it for a year. Morning Consult, Suffolk, I don't want to say decades, but it almost is decades. They've been doing it since at least, the unlikely voter poll, surveying non-registered voters, premise data. Everybody who's done this and has looked at this knows that Donald Trump and Trump alone has this enormous advantage with non-registered voters and unlikely voters. When you ask two very important questions, one to the non-registered voter, Who would motivate you enough to register and participate in the political process? And when you ask the unlikely voter, who would motivate you? Who could possibly motivate you to vote when you are feeling disenfranchised, feeling demotivated, feeling put down, feeling like your vote doesn't matter, feeling like elections are rigged, feeling like the ruling class is just never going to give it up, feeling like no matter what, your vote doesn't count? Who could motivate you? Nobody is cited but Donald Trump. Ron DeSantis was never cited. God bless his soul. Nikki Haley is not cited. Chris Christie was not cited. Vivek had some, but it wasn't even close. Wasn't even close. And among these people, all of that universe who says, okay, I could be motivated to vote. Fine. If you were in the voting booth right now, who would you vote for? It's Trump by 20 points or more. In my lifetime, not just as a public pollster, not just as a private pollster, and doing this as a career, in my entire lifetime since I've started to be interested and involved in politics, which, by the way, happened at like 15 years old. I always loved it. This has never been an opportunity for Republicans. It has always been an opportunity for Democrats. They were always the one with the unlikely, unmotivated voter. And if they could get him out, they would win. If they couldn't, and it was a likely voter electorate, they would lose. It's that simple. And instead, they're blowing all this money on this. And I'm going to tell you why this is so dangerous. And so it's just stupid. It's just strategically stupid. Here's another one.
Nikki Haley.
And why did you vote for Nikki Haley?
It's a vote against Trump. I think it would be better to have her against Biden in the elections than it would be Trump and her.
Do you consider yourself generally independent, Republican, or Democrat?
Democrat.
So when you undeclared, you voted for Nikki Haley. If it was Nikki Haley against Joe Biden in a general election, who are you voting for?
Joe Biden.
What is the...
There you go. And for idiots who don't know what they're talking about and keep saying, well, those are the rules. These what happened. This has never happened on this scale. The amount of money being used to do it is astronomical, unheard of, and historic. That's Nashua County, Nashua Township. The one we played for you before is Hanover. It's a bunch of Democratic areas, a bunch of college people. That may be somewhat surprising. But if you were watching yesterday, we gave you the preview, especially on locals. We gave you the rundown earlier in the day so you could know what to expect. How much of the vote share is coming from what parts, what townships, what cities, what towns, right? How much of that could you be expected to go for Nikki Haley? Where could she do well? Where will Trump do well? And we showed you Manchester and Nashua and Merrimack, Mayor, whatever. All are generally in a normal Republican electorate, pretty close to each other, and they almost mirror to the T the statewide vote result. Last night, Donald Trump won Manchester by 16 points. Absolutely indicated a 15-point 16. It give or take a couple of points either way. Could have been as high as 18-20, could have been as low as 14-12, but 16 points. Nashua was much closer. Trump at the end of the day, and let's bring it up just to be a little bit careful. We always like to be correct. It's Nashua Township. Let's take a look at it. Okay. And as you can see here, Trump won it 41.9 to 45.8. Again, perfect example of what I'm talking about here, because when the first votes were reported from the early, and I don't mean early vote, that they voted early. I mean, and there was some early vote, but it's not a big thing in New Hampshire. In a primary, Republican primary. What happened is that Democratic voters who are not the working class voted first. And then as that Scantron reader and tallies up the votes, the working class came in later and Trump took it from her. But this is much closer. This is only about a 6-point lead, 6.1, right? Or let's just call it 6. Let's round. It's not 6 points, really. We'll round to 6. In Concord, which we told you would be the worst of Donald Trump's areas, he actually lost it by almost the same margin. A little bit more. And then again in Manchester, right? We see it. It's about a 16-point win. And then you have Mayor Mac right here, where Donald Trump won by about 4 points. Why did it not follow the normal pattern this time? Because there are more Democrats in the areas where she made it closer and or won, Concord being the one that she did take. In the areas where there were not that many Democrats and Democrat-leaning independents, we're just calling them Democrats, all right? The 10% of the electorate was Democrat, but so much more of it were behavioral Democrats who are already eligible. You did not need to convince them by October to change their registration. And by the way, registration is static. Identification is fluid. This is something else some of these other people, especially those who were justifying or agreeing and defending Nikki Haley's lie. Just a few days ago, folks were running the clips of Nikki Haley saying it's a lie. We're not targeting Democrats. We want Democrats to vote for us, but we're not actually targeting them. It was a total lie. And now we know it was a total lie. Again, that voter just voted in a Republican primary. What does that mean? It means campaigns in Nashua Township. Let's just stick towards his township, which of course is Hillsborough County. It is a very important county in the state of New Hampshire when you are running elections. He will now be tagged as a Republican primary voter. When Republicans go to purchase lists, for instance, and they want to send out a mailer, area like this, 70 grand, easy. 120,000 maybe, depends what you're trying to do. Easy. Drop of a bucket. They will now be sending a mailer to him and wasting that money. And a whole bunch of others when they go to call somebody like me and say, hey, we need to do a call to action text campaign. Almost never would I recommend to people to do a single MMS or SMS push. It takes more than that. It takes repeated contacts, multiple points of contacts. I'm not giving away the secret formula. We have already proven that we have demonstrated proof of concept in certain areas. We know what it takes to get people out, especially certain kinds of people. You are going to waste a fortune because these people are going to be in your data. When you send out door knockers, you will be wasting time, precious time and resources on people who are going to slam the door in your face. Anyone who does this for a living knows exactly what I'm talking about right now, and you know exactly what I'm saying is true. The data the RNC has already, and the data a lot of these vendors have already, is already crap. They deal with this already too much. And that was already a major problem for Republican vendors and Republican committees, the RNC. And they give campaign sidekick to somebody who's running for Congress. Their data sucks. They have latency issues, to say the least. Now, when they go to poll, again, every month, when the Secretary of State or whomever it is updates their records, when the national voter file databases that they are linked to, vendors, it's L2, Aristotle, whoever it is, when they update it, they're now going to be marked with an attribute that says that they are a likely Republican voter. Every state Nikki Haley moves into is going to cost the Republicans millions of dollars that they really shouldn't be spending. It's going to take, I don't even know. To be honest, I can't give you an accurate time. It could take 2 cycles, 3 cycles to clean and scrub these people out of the data. What do we call it all the time? Republicans have Crappy data, dirty rolls, hundreds and hundreds of missing attributes, things they don't know, incorrect information, and all lists. All databases have incorrect information, but the name of the game is to get it as accurate as possible. She's already tainted Iowa. She now has tainted New Hampshire. If she moves in to other states, what's on Super Tuesday? If she does this on Super Tuesday, let's go to our 2024 Republican nomination calendar, or really, we don't even have to go to the calendar. There's one, if you haven't seen it yet on People's Pundit Daily, if you just go to peoplespunditdaily.com, you're going to see right there, bang, a graphic that says the 2024 Republican nomination. If you click on that image, that graphic, it's going to pull up this page right here. All right. The first thing you're going to see is the delegate tracker, and this is estimated. We're still waiting for townships to be reported. You got to be honest. I don't have total input onto this thing. It comes through. There are things called rounding rules. I agree with the green papers right now as it stands. Donald Trump should get 12. Nikki Haley should get 10. This is reflecting a more, what's the word I'm looking for? This is reflecting a more pro-Nikki estimate. I don't agree with that at the moment because there are rounding rules, and they will determine if there are candidates closer or further away from those rounding rules that get that added delegate. When I did the math on what I thought the margin would be at the end of the day when all these votes are finally tallied, is you need the total statewide vote to calculate it. When I did my own estimate, I got 1210. The green papers, presidential green papers, they got 1210. They're really good at this. They've been doing this for a while. Decision desk, I guess, ended up somewhere on one more for Nikki, one less for Trump, and I don't know why yet. We'll see. Anyway, let's go down to this little delegate map here. Okay, we already have the state of Iowa that's going to have to be cleaned now. The state of New Hampshire that's going to have to be cleaned now. The state of Nevada, she's not competing in, but she is on the primary there. The question is up in the air as to whether or not she is doing this in Nevada to try to win a meaningless primary, I guess, to avoid being embarrassed by none of these candidates getting a significant share of the vote. But in case you haven't noticed, the Silver State's pretty important this year. I have long said Republicans get their hopes up in this state and they can't carry it. But the swing with Hispanics is real. All Donald Trump would need to do is hold his white vote share. And if the polling is correct, which I believe it is, if the polling is correct, he will carry the state of Nevada because of Clark County. He'll battle Washoe closer to a draw, maybe even carry it by a few points. How do I know? Because we had Adam Laxalt losing it. He lost it. We had Trump winning it by 4. Same sample. Clark County, we had Adam Laxalt doing well, but roughly down 5. And Donald Trump up. If he really is doing that much better with Hispanics, like every single poll is showing at this point, you will see it in Nevada. You will see it in Arizona. You will see it in New Mexico. You will see it in Texas. You'll see it last in California because they're more liberal there. And even though there are areas of the Central Valley, for instance, where they're not. So it's not a good time to be poisoning and tainting the databases, the voter files. It is not very good to have knockers, volunteers, and whatever go knock on the doors of Biden voters who are going to vote for Nikki Haley in the primary. They will now be hit with an attribute in these databases that say they are a Republican, even if they're not registered, because you don't just target registered Republicans. You have to look at vote history. We have long argued this. You know, if you're a watcher, behavioral attributes that tell us whether or not you are a Republican or a Democrat. There are states where there are no registration by parties. Michigan, Virginia, and we have to do inference models. We rely on these attributes to run these inference models. She's screwing it all up. It'll take at least a cycle or 2 to fix this. And then on to South Carolina, where Democrats every year talk about how close it could be this time, blah, 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 blah. It's going to throw it way off. Then what? Texas, where Democrats want to take as well. Ted Cruz is struggling. Ted Cruz is struggling. Donald Trump may have a solid lead because he does better with Hispanics in South Texas, but Ted Cruz is in bad shape. People are like immediately dismissing, oh, Ted Cruz is not going to lose that seat. Everyone in Texas knows Ted Cruz is struggling. Talking to my friend Don Smith the other day, he said, everybody feels it. You can feel it, just like you could feel it in 18. He's in trouble. Running almost 10 points behind Donald Trump. That's a great idea. Let's taint the database in Texas. Let's waste millions of dollars of Ted Cruz's money targeting Democrats who will vote for his opponent anyway. It's a great use of their resources, don't you think? Also going on to California, where there are a handful of House seats that Republicans are likely going to lose or are in danger of losing. David Valadao, he is in deep trouble. Ken Calvert, don't let him lie to you. He is in deep trouble and they know it. John Duarte is all but defeated. Mike Garcia, by far the strongest of all those candidates that are in, what are competitive districts, and he is going to have one hell of a time himself. You know what Mike Garcia does not need? His district tainted with Biden voters that he's going to waste his money on sending his door knockers to, that he's going to waste his money on, and by the way, the Congressional Leadership Fund's money, sending mailers to, that he's going to waste the time and money from his phone bankers calling just to slam the door in their face, rip up their mailers, turn off their TVs, hang up their phones, opt out of their text messages. The cumulative waste because of what Nikki Haley is doing will be astronomical. Democrats don't do this. Democrats win. Democrats use their heads. They may use their hearts when it comes to policy, but they use their heads when it comes to slaughtering their political enemies. And by the way, remember how I always used to say, remember Rich's recipe for how to bake a Republican? 1/3 crooked, 1/3 corrupt, 1/3 stupid, bake it in the oven at 450, give it a donation, and bang, in 15 minutes you got a Republican. I finally figured out the third C, so we nicely fit an alliteration use into it. 1/3 crooked, 1/3 coward, and 1/3 clueless. Never underestimate the Republican ability to snatch defeat from the hands of victory. It is true. Maine. Let's go over to Maine, another New England area. Loads of Biden voters in 1st Congressional District, Maine. Hell, there are most definitely 40% of them in the 2nd Congressional District. Let's taint the voter rolls in the state of Maine because the door knockers already don't have a hell of a time going from 8 miles from one house to another in the Republican area of the damn state. No, let's make them walk 8 miles in the wrong direction just to have the door slammed in their face because of Nikki Haley. This is the real world practical impact of what Nikki Haley is doing. Super Tuesday is a lot of states, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of states. And frankly, Republicans don't have the money for this. They don't have the money for this. Colorado, also on Super Tuesday. Minnesota, where we polled. And it looked, by the way, what's the damage to this? Minnesota has no registration by party. She could really cost that state with crappy data. A deadlocked race right now between Trump and Biden. Deadlocked in Minnesota. With West, Stein, at least Stein. Well, it's easy to get on the ballot in Minnesota. RFK. Who knows what could happen? Let's blow this perfect opportunity, shall we? With 300,000 non-college whites who are still off the voter rolls that need to be brought in because they would vote for Donald Trump by 32 points if you did. Let's make that task much harder. And let's mix them in now with a bunch of tagged behavioral Republicans who are not at all Republican. How many votes for them? How many votes is she going to get in the state of Minnesota if she continues this until Super Tuesday? How many Democrats is she going to try to spend tens of millions of dollars to motivate out there, who then will be tagged as a Republican? Another fairly important state that is on March 5th is the Tar Heel state. It is, of course, a semi-closed primary. How many behaviorals is she going to stuff in that electorate who will then slam the door on every door knocker's face, rip up every mailer, opt out of every text message, hang up on every phone banker, and on. Are you guys getting my point here? This is not a joke. Because this effort is something that I really have never seen before. This is totally different. It is totally different. I just have, frankly, no way to confidently tell you how many records we would be talking about here and how much money we would be talking about. I don't have a way to, I can't tell you that with any degree of certainty. All I can tell you for certain is it's a lot. It's going to cost a fortune. I don't like getting involved with candidates. It's just not like that. I like to publicly poll. We have corporate clients. We do things that are, we do market research. I frankly don't even like to work in politics. I don't like to poll for candidates. I don't like to look, I certainly don't like to clean up their lists. I never even thought that having candidates come to us and say, hey, can you scrub our list? Can you do these dedupes? And fix our, I never even thought that would be, a significant, if any, part of our business. But it has become, because the data center, the RNC's data center, and what they get from Campaign Sidekick, what are given to candidates from Campaign Sidekick is just garbage. It's just garbage. And it's not, and by the way, when I fix someone's list, it's not then being sent back to Campaign Sidekick or back to data center, which they're not sending it back to append those corrections and fix the database. They just don't. They're keeping it in their own account on Sidekick, and then they move forward with their information. And to bring up Don again, but John O'Shea in Texas 12. That is a perfect example. The Dallas-Fort Worth area, tons of change of address flags every month. It's a massively growing area. Tarrant County is the biggest, most populous Republican county in the entire country. And he's being smart, and he's making sure he's appending his own, but it's not getting fed back to the RNC to fix their problems. She will make this problem that much harder for John O'Shea in Texas 12. that much more difficult for Ted Cruz, that much more difficult for the presidential, the eventual, the inevitable, the presumptive at this point, Republican presidential nominee, Donald Trump. Dave McCormick in Pennsylvania. Kerry Lake in Arizona. Go on and on. Whether it's Sam Brown or Stephanie Phillips in Nevada. By the way, 70% of the statewide vote cast in Nevada comes from Clark County. That's where her Democrat vote would come. Boom, tagged, primary voter, Republican. Could you use certain filters to try to work them out? Sure. But unfortunately, not everyone has the capabilities I have. This gets to the heart of the point that I'm making. Republicans are totally behind the ball, way behind the ball. The only reason why I'm way ahead of them is because I work with left-wing vendors. Sorry. And I'm not ashamed to say it. They have better tools, they have better tech, they have better data. If I want more accurate results in a poll, I'm going to work with whoever the hell I think is going to do me a solid. All right, it's 1:35. Let's take a break. I did say I would have to end the show a little bit early today. There's a whole lot going on after it, and I did say that to the coverage for people last night. Not everybody was watching it, obviously, that's watching now, especially since the size of the audience, so it's looking pretty big. So I understand if you guys didn't hear it, but I won't end it that too early, maybe like 15 minutes. Let's take a real quick break, though, and tell you about our friends at the Wellness Company. Love these guys, love these kits. But I'll tell you what, Dr. McCullough, you have got to make them in black camo. That would be dope. Recent clusters of respiratory illnesses in northern China, and now outbreaks of what's being referred to as white lung syndrome in the U.S., they're littered across the headlines right now. You can Google it if you want to, but it does shine a light on the need to be prepared for unexpected and medical emergencies. Go check it out. Nature.com, CNN, it's everywhere. Almost 90% of the pharmaceuticals in the U.S. are produced outside of the U.S. So when this next crisis hits, will your family have what it needs? We saw this with COVID. Countries, our so-called friends and friendly competitors, clamp down on exports. They stockpile their own during these crises. That causes the price of drugs to rise in our country, pharmacy shelves to go bare. It's already starting to happen. It's reported on DC News right now, CNN.com, ABC News. And it's not only that. You have to ask yourself, will your doctor even prescribe what you ask them for? When you say, hey, I want ivermectin. Hey, I need a Z-Pack. You guys have heard me talk about this before. I'm bringing it to you again. The Wellness Company's Medical Emergency Kit. It includes 8 life-saving meds like amoxicillin, Z-Pack, ivermectin to help you keep you and your family safe in the face of natural disasters, supply chain shortages, medical emergencies like white lung or COVID. It's also a great guidebook that comes with it for safe use. It'll tell you everything those drugs are commonly prescribed for, dosages, you name it. In a time when over 40% of Americans say that they would avoid a doctor or hospital unless it was a catastrophic situation, the Wellness Company Medical Emergency Kit is providing you a solution. Go to this site right here, twc.health/TPP. The link is in the description for all the videos. twc.health/TPP. Grab your medical emergency kit right now. One more time, twc.health/TPP. That will get you 10% off. And by the way, while you're at it, if you scroll down, all right, there's also, you can use it for spike support as well. This is obviously a product that people come to me. They say, hey, look, you know what? I did what they told me to do. I got the spike. You know what I'm talking about. I'm being careful for YouTubers. You know, what do I do now? I don't like what I'm seeing. I don't like the effects. I don't like what the possible impact could be on my health. Spike support is your detox solution. All right? So keep your body at peak condition after an infection and guard against shedding. This will combat the spike protein in vitro. Same thing. If you use the same length, you go to get spike support, that will also get you through that very same link 10% off. All right. I thought I had something. that I wanted to. There is, but you know what? I'll wind up just finding it. I'll play it for you. I mentioned it briefly with Will, and I think that it is worth showing. And then I know we played it last night, but there are some really stupid people on social media, and I have to tell you something about this clip with Jeff DeWitt, and Kerry Lake. Some moron. It was one of these anons. I think it's even a fake name. It's a name, but I don't think it's a real name. Probably isn't a real picture. One of these accounts that were like created in 2022 to support DeSantis and like pretend like there's this huge DeSantis only vote. It's just not in the data. It's just not there. And they're sowing discord. Pretty much the George Soros wet dream scenario, what Barnes and I told you about on the first episode of What Are the Odds in the prior year, that this was what George Soros wanted, and he said it. I would love if Ron DeSantis could be convinced to run to help fracture MAGA. We could absolutely use that to our advantage, and then we can have a standby loser like Nikki Haley, who could be like our backup plan because she's no different anyway, but just not Donald Trump. We have to stop MAGA. And one of these idiot accounts, and then they repeat the same thing. That's why you know it's totally coordinated. They repeat the same thing. People don't talk like that. This sounds fabricated. I knew months ago when Jeff DeWitt tried to bribe Kerry Lake. I'm just going to tell you that without getting too much into the details. The tape confirms she's a freaking rock star, and that's what I was told. Yeah, the tape confirms that Kerry Lake cannot be bought. I knew that, though. I believed her response. We should try to get her on to talk about this. I don't know how Jeff DeWitt still has a job. Kerry Lake is trending right now, 200,000, by the way.
I'll contact them.
Yeah, I would love to get her on. And I'm curious to see what's actually going on right now. Let's see what it's got to be about this clip. Has Jeff DeWitt quit yet? Because at this point, he needs to go. This is unbelievable. What I want you to know, though, beyond all that, is how much this happens. All right? How much this happens. This is because people ask me all the time, how could it be that we're as Republican voters are always betrayed? They're betrayed by the justices. They're betrayed by the rhinos in Congress. This one runs to be a super border security, pro Trump MAGA guy, and then he turns out to be like Dan Crenshaw. Like, how does this happen? This is how it happens. Only I can count on one hand how many people I personally know that I could expect will behave like Kerry Lake. Meaning principally. The rest of them cave. They cave. And then they got him on tape taking a bribe. That's how the real world works. Jeff DeWitt sounds scared. We know the cartels absolutely influence Arizona politics. Adrian Fontes is the cartel Secretary of State. Sorry. You watch Breaking Bad, folks? Get with the real world. It's sad when television can sometimes be more realistic than what people dream up in their mind about how the real world works. This is how the real world works. She said, kill me. You're going to have to murk me, she said. God, I don't care whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. Don't you want your elected officials or your aspiring elected officials to act like that? If this was a left-wing person, I would say, God bless you. The country is lucky to have you, even though I may not agree with everything you say. So here I am right now. Because I'm telling you, I've gotten to know Kerry Lake. She's the real deal. She's a good person. She's a good person. Tough. She's the real deal. I am not at all surprised. So when they can't bribe people to get out of their way, they certainly don't want politicians representing the people that Kerry Lake, for instance, appeals to, right? And when they can't address their concerns, and someone like Dean Phillips even, because God bless Dean Phillips too, right, guys? God bless Dean Phillips. And it's wrong what's happening to him. It's just as wrong what is happening to Dean Phillips when it comes to ballot removals and this blocking of the democratic process, the self-governance electoral process. It is no better. What is happening to Dean Phillips is no better than what is happening to Donald Trump. Not the prosecutions, but the attempt to remove them from the ballot and stymie self-governance. God bless Dean Phillips. He waltzes over to a MAGA rally in New Hampshire. I want to see what this is all about. I can't believe CNN aired the damn interview. I can't believe they did. He's like, these are good people. They're not making unreasonable requests. You guys can't just call half the country a name because you won't respond. This is why I tend to agree with Will Scharf. I don't think that they're stupid. Many of them are, but they're not as dumb as Republicans. They're doing this on purpose, and they're just going to demonize people who disagree or who say otherwise. And, like I said, God bless Dean Phillips. I want to play Charles Payne because he just had it with with Jessica Tarloff last night. And this is what I was talking about with Will. I want to play this. I may have to get the other version of it. This may not be a good enough version. Not a good enough version. Hold on one second. It's just the other one is longer, but whatever. We'll just play it because it is important to do. It's important to play. Here we go. This is it. This is, again, it is going to be a longer version. You're going to hear Jessica, but maybe that's good because you'll hear her tee up her nonsense, and then you'll hear Charles Payne go nuts. And it's not even in a bad way. He just levels her.
Charles, you talked about the issues here and how immigration here is at the top, but it also is an economic issue, and it crosses all boundaries. And it is a weakness for President Biden and the Democrats. Dean Phillips talks about this on the trail, and he talks about how Democrats demean MAGA voters. He talked about it with me today, saying that, it's just strange that they're talking about a group of voters like that.
Yeah, and I don't think it's narcissism. I think you've lived in New York long enough. It's maybe a New York thing. Someone punches you, you punch him back harder. That's why I grew up in Harlem.
Not if the country's at stake, right?
He became president of the United States with that same personality. I don't think that, listen, I think it's worse with Biden calling MAGA. Biden's anger and vitriol and hatred for MAGA is far more worse than President Trump's individual battles with someone who crosses him. That is something that is really detrimental to this country, that the president of the United States despises half of the United States. President Biden, I said earlier today, I just wrote about a week ago, I had a segment coming up, so I Googled Biden hates MAGA. Nothing but articles after articles after articles. He has expressed hatred for half
who's writing
of the country.
Those articles?
Doesn't matter who's writing those articles. Who's writing the articles about Donald Trump? Who's deciding whether or not they can air a Trump rally? Rachel Maddow the other night again. We're going to try it. We have to do this as a constant evolving decision. We can't be irresponsible and let him spew these lies. You have some nerve, lady. Steve Scalise and 4 others were shot over your lie. Russian hackers, bounties, right? Russian bounties for soldiers. Remember this? Over and over and over again with the BS. And by the way, your freaking president just yesterday, in between being booed at his own event in Virginia, said Terry McAuliffe was the rightful winner of Virginia. Of course, Terry McAuliffe was defeated by Glenn Youngkin. So they can election deny all they want, and it's not a danger to democracy. They still have Stacey Abrams on. They still give Hillary Clinton a platform. Joe Biden himself made those comments. Their leader in the U.S. House of Representatives right now pushed the collusion hoax and said Donald Trump was illegitimate. The more we learn about this, folks, the more illegitimate this election looks. Hakeem Jeffries, 2017. Have some self-awareness, lady. She is everything that is wrong with this country right now. Everything. Go.
Doesn't matter. Look
And it's
at him.
not.
Because the bottom line is he says it. He has vitriol for them.
Yep.
And so does
Hates their
MSNBC, and so does CNN, and so does the New York Times. They have vitriol for half of the nation. They don't look at them like fellow Americans, and it's
They don't look at them
unfortunate.
like human
They try to
beings.
paint them as racist. All the things that they do to their fellow Americans who simply want a safe home, a safe community, for their children to have prosperity, they want the same thing. But they demean him all the time. That's why I think Phillips was so intriguing, because he went to a rally to find out for himself. And guess what? Golly, these are some pretty cool people. They're just like us.
Exactly what Jamie Dimon said this week as well.
Jamie Dimon, I played that clip, the CEO of JP Morgan and Chase, or JP Morgan, said you can't do this and pretend this is not a real problem. You cannot call half of the country these names. You cannot do this. But they think they can. And I'm going to tell you why before I finish this, let this clip go. If you think Cernovich is being hyperbolic, you're nuts. Governments who do not respond to large swaths of the population with legitimate grievances, and they have no intention to, and they demonize them and they dehumanize them. Charles Payne said they don't look at them like they're their fellow Americans. They don't look at them like they are human beings. Why? Because this is what the state does when they're ready to eliminate that group of people by any and every mean necessary. They're not going to just tolerate you hooting and hollering forever, folks. You didn't think that was going to happen, did you? They're going to delete you. They're going to replace you. They're going to persecute you. We are no different when it comes to dealing with the forces of nature and the human condition. I do believe in American exceptionalism. I just believe that what makes us exceptional is missing right now. It is not being championed. Those values are not being adhered to. Those principles are not being respected. So that puts us in the category with everybody else. And I strongly suggest you don't even have to read his books, but you may want to learn the general argument R.J. Rummel is making in Death by Government. They don't tolerate you bitching and moaning in their ear forever.
And it's smart to understand. And also you see the shift that's happening, right? You look at Black voters, Hispanic voters, college women, Latino.
You notice that white woman had a hard time even spouting the word black. She almost choked. She didn't know whether or not she was going to use the correct word. Did you see? Black voters. Did you hear it? This has got to stop.
Those who have moved towards Trump.
Yes.
So it's no longer that people are in these boxes based on what their gender is or what they look like. They appear to want, a safe country, and they appear to want a good economy, regardless of what label they have.
That's completely fine. And I know that the lines have shifted dramatically, but Joe Biden's responsible for a lot of that. Say that he's demeaned half the country. First of all, it's 74 million people that voted for Donald Trump. And he is explicit every time he talks about the MAGA movement to say that this is a subsection of the Republican Party, which is borne out in elections when you see people voting against Donald Trump. And this idea that
But what about the people
way that
voting for him?
Democrats-
What about the people
Are
voting
you
for him?
idiot?
These teleprompter speeches. I mean, you have
Oh,
to
and it's just
understand.
74 million Americans. It's just 74 million, Laura. This is an argument a lot of these rhinos and never Trumpers and Steve Deeses are making as well. All right. More people are in the country than vote. And currently right now, the adult population agrees more with Donald Trump than the voting population does. So her little comment, oh, it's just 74 million. Oh, yeah, it's just the most votes ever received by an incumbent president in any party. Ever. And she's minimizing it. I got news for Jessica. A little reality check for her. If every American voted, none of these elections would even be close. Donald Trump would wipe the floor with you nutcases. That's the main problem Republicans have right now. They can't get normal, non-voting Americans to the polls. Trump does so at higher rates, but they're still leaving millions of them on the table.
Yeah, yes, but he is talking about insurrectionists.
Oh my
God. Yes, he is.
No.
Why is he talking about January 6th? And he calls.
He says MAGA like it's a swear word, you know, instead of a slogan.
If you get called regularly,
he's the
which
president of the
Democrats
United
do,
States.
thugs,
He's the commander in chief.
pedophiles.
Why can't he call the border a crisis?
Jessica, is your friends Jeffrey Epstein and Harvey Weinstein not pedophiles and rapists? So if you don't like being called pedophiles and rapists, stop hanging out with pedophiles and rapists. Ed Buck, Adam Schiff's buddy. This is a man who would drug young black men and sodomize them while they were unconscious. If you don't like being called pedophiles and rapists, stop hanging out with pedophiles and rapists.
Well, he's denigrating and castigating Americans. No, the voters are talking about that, Jessica.
But
because
this point is back to demeaning voters.
The President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, went to Philadelphia a year and a half ago with a Marine posted behind him.
I saw.
And gave a decidedly political speech where he insulted a large part of the country. And I've said many times on this network, and I'll say it again tonight, if people, a lot of people, spend a fraction of the time that they spent obsessing over Donald Trump, the person, learning one thing about the Trump voter, things may be very different. This is Joe Biden's version of Hillary's deplorable and irredeemable.
By the way, that's Kellyanne Conway. You may not have picked it up, but that's actually Kellyanne Conway digging a little knife in Donald Trump's back. That's her giving them a little bit of a hint how to get rid of or oppose Donald Trump. I'm not going to get into it because I don't want to give them any ideas. But if you didn't pick up on what she just said, go back and listen to it again and you'll hear it. The fact of the matter is that speech, I saw it. That was like Emperor Palpatine. Okay. Everybody called that the Hitlerian moment for Joe Biden. Remember when Chris Matthews referred to Donald Trump's inaugural address as Hitlerian? Meanwhile, you have this guy in front of this. You should never have used the armed forces like that in the first place. Red backdrop, like he's from the Sith, man. It's a Fourth Reich parade, dude. All right. It's 1:57. I got a boogie. Listen, if you like the videos, don't forget to like them, share them far and wide. Send them to your friends. And, of course, subscribe. Hit the notification bell both on YouTube and Rumble. That'll let you know when we're going to go live. If you're on YouTube, mosey on over to Rumble. Give it a like. Give it a subscribe. Vice versa if you're on Rumble. All of these metrics really do help. They help out a lot. It takes a couple of seconds of your time to smash the like button or to go over to the other platform and smash the like button and subscribe. It's enormously helpful. It really is. But of course, the best place to follow us is on Locals, peoplespundit.locals.com. It'll be Nevada before you know it. It'll be South Carolina before you know it. We have a lot more good stuff to come. So stay tuned. All right. Thank everybody real quick for tuning in last night. It was another successful election night coverage. Thank you to our guest, Will Scharf. Don't forget to check him out. Will, great segment. Thanks as always, my friend. It was an incredible conversation. Looking forward to doing it again. And other than that, nothing but love for you. Keep an eye to Locals. There's always more good to come. And we will see you on Friday, noon, Eastern Standard Time.